The movie starts with a narrator explaining a type of bars called drop bars. These bars are used by mobsters to secretly clean their illegal money. Despite looking like normal bars, they are where mobsters move money in and out, using bagmen to transfer it. The bar owners are unaware when their bar will be used as a drop bar. In one of these bars, we meet the movie's main character, a bartender named Bob Sajanowski. He appears calm but has a violent side hidden beneath his gentle exterior due to his troubled history. The bar is managed by Bob's cousin Marv, although it's actually owned by the Chechen Mafia. A group of elderly patrons are reminiscing and having a good time. They make a toast to their late friend Richie Whelan, who was killed under mysterious circumstances a decade ago. Bob serves them another round of drinks, but Marv scolds him, emphasizing that the bar is a business, not a charity. He becomes even angrier when he realizes that his gentle bartender has allowed an elderly woman to drink and smoke illegally in the bar when he's not present. Despite Bob's belief that he was simply being kind, he eventually takes his boss and older cousin's advice to heart. We also learn that Bob is a devout Catholic who attends church regularly. One night, while heading home, he hears a dog whimpering from a neighbor's trash can. Upon investigating, he discovers a badly injured pit bull puppy left for dead. The homeowner, Nadia, confronts him, questioning his presence near her house. Bob explains the situation and implores her to help the injured puppy. However, Nadia is cautious and asks for his identification. She takes a photo of his ID and shares it with her friends to ensure that Bob poses no threat to the puppy. They decide to care for the puppy's wounds, which include bruises and cuts that suggest it had been severely mistreated, although luckily the injuries aren't too deep. In their conversation, Bob notices bruises on Nadia's neck. He learns that she's a waitress at a restaurant and has experience with animal rescue. They agree that an animal rescue might not be the best place for the injured puppy. Given Bob's compassion for the dog, he convinces Nadia to care for it until he can take it back in 2 days. Meanwhile, at a nearby bar, two nervous brothers discuss their plan to rob Marv's bar. The older brother is confident, wanting to showcase their skills to their superiors, while the younger, a drug addict, is frightened because Marv's bar is controlled by the ruthless Chechen Mafia. Eventually, the older brother persuades him to proceed. Back at the bar, just before closing time, masked robbers burst in, brandishing guns. They demand that Marv fill a bag with money. Despite Marv's calm warning that they're in over their heads and will regret this, the gunmen coerce him at gunpoint. During the robbery, Bob notices that one of the robbers has a broken watch. After the robbery, they discover Randy, a bar staff member, beaten to death in the backyard. Later, Detective Torres arrives to investigate the robbery. He recognizes Bob from the church they both attend, although they've never spoken. During the investigation, Bob doesn't have much information to offer since the robbers were covered completely. However, he does mention that one of them had a broken watch stopped at 6:15. The stolen amount is revealed to be around $5,000. Alongside the crime details, Detective Torres is curious about why Bob always skips the line for communion at church, a practice Bob initially denies. Despite lying, Bob feels uncomfortable admitting his troubled past, which is why he avoids communion to skip confession. Marv becomes furious upon learning that Bob disclosed the detail about the broken watch during the investigation, fearing repercussions from the Chechen Mafia. At a later time, Bob retrieves the puppy and asks Nadia to accompany him to a pet store to buy supplies, as he's never owned a dog before. They purchase bowls, a leash, poop bags, and an instructional book. Bob suggests naming the puppy Rocco but is more drawn to the name Mike. Nadia prefers Rocco, though, and they end up creating a name tag for him. Despite this, Bob remains convinced that Mike is a better name for the dog. The following morning at church, Bob is surprised to discover a statue of Saint Rocco, who is depicted with a dog. After finishing their shopping, Bob drops Nadia off at her home, unaware that a thug named Eric Deeds is observing them from a distance. On another day, as Bob and Marv are shoveling snow in the backyard, they are visited by Chavka, the leader of the Chechen Mafia that controls the bar. Chavka reveals that he has captured one of the men involved in the robbery. The man is brutally tortured, gagged, and has his foot impaled, secured to the floor of a van. Chavka questions Marv and Bob about their knowledge of this man, but they both deny any involvement. Chavka also inquires about how the police learned of the broken watch, and Bob apologizes in desperation. Chavka warns Marv to retrieve the stolen money before driving off in haste. Marv feels threatened by this encounter, fearing that Chavka's knowledge of how to recover the money might implicate him in the robbery. Meanwhile, Detective Torres investigates and discovers that Marv lost his bar to a Chechen Mafia led by Papa Umarov, Chavka's father, a decade ago. While discussing this with a colleague, they acknowledge that Papa Umarov's influence is too great to take down. Torres humorously suggests he should stick with them then. Back in his daily life, Bob enjoys the company of Rocco, but he's still learning how to care for a dog, leading to some messes around the house that he has to clean up. One morning at a dog park, Bob is playing with Rocco when Nadia, who is working out, approaches him. Nadia mentions losing her night shift and offers to take care of Rocco for some extra money. Bob, who is attracted to Nadia, agrees readily, and they exchange contact information. After they part ways, Eric Deeds arrives and compliments Bob's dog. However, due to his suspicious appearance, Bob is wary and quickly leaves with Rocco. Marv lives with his sister, Dottie, and their father is confined to a nursing home, kept alive by machines despite his lack of brain function. The siblings discuss their father's situation. Dottie is frustrated by the excessive spending on their father, considering it pointless since he's essentially not living. She proposes unplugging him so they can enjoy their lives, such as traveling Europe. Marv vehemently disagrees, feeling obligated to care for their father even though it inconveniences them. Marv meets with one of the robbers, Fitz, and reveals his involvement in the robbery. He chastises Fitz for his brother's mistake of wearing the broken watch and for the injuries inflicted on Rarty, which led to an ambulance being called and police involvement. Marv suggests that their bar will likely become a drop bar soon, so they need to execute the next robbery more cleanly. He emphasizes the importance of avoiding mistakes. Meanwhile, on the street, a suspicious-looking stranger in a car asks Marv for the hospital address. Despite giving him the address, Marv senses something off about the stranger. Back at Bob's house, he's having a conversation with Rocco, apologizing for not being able to take him out that day. A knock on his door surprises Bob, and it's Eric who enters without much politeness. Eric demands to know where Bob's puppy is, leaving Bob confused. Eric asserts that the dog is his and explains that by law, a dog owner should have a security chip number and license. He educates Bob on security chips implanted in dogs to identify owners and presents his own chip serial, implying ownership. Bob insists Rocco is his because Eric mistreats the dog. However, Eric threatens to frame Bob in front of the police. An uncertain Bob asks what Eric wants, to which Eric subtly menaces him, mentioning that the weather is unpredictable and taking Bob's umbrella before leaving. Bob's relationship with Nadia improves due to Rocco's presence. During a cafe conversation, Nadia reveals that Bob is the first person to not inquire about the marks on her neck. Bob believes it's her personal matter, stating he's not one to judge. Nadia, however, opens up about her dark past, admitting to self-harm with a potato peeler while under the influence. She despised her addicted self and contemplated suicide, but she managed to turn her life around and find meaning. Back at the bar, Marv shares his worries about the strange individual asking for a hospital address, fearing for his life. Marv remains haunted by losing the bar to Chavka Umarov after a decade, or as he insists, 8.5 years. He harbors deep self-loathing, which influences his life choices. Bob's shock escalates when he discovers something disturbing in a trash bag, a severed hand, along with money soaked in blood. The bag also contains the stolen money, one of the robbers' broken watches, and the severed hand. Bob and Marv are puzzled as to who would return the money and why they included the hand. Bob enters the bar with the severed hand and begins to skillfully wrap it, making Marv curious about his seemingly practiced ability, as if he's done it many times before. In the midst of this task, Eric unexpectedly bursts into the bar due to their negligence in closing the door. Marv tries to send Eric away, claiming they're closed. While Bob narrowly avoids being caught, Eric greets Bob briefly before leaving, though he's clearly curious about the situation. Marv is baffled by the connection between Bob and Eric, especially when Bob reveals that Eric claims to be Rocco's owner. This revelation heightens Marv's concern. Eric is known locally as a thug and is rumored to be the one who killed Richie Whelan, the person to whom the initial toast was made in the movie. Marv informs Bob that Eric has spent time in a mental institution and has a criminal record. Marv strongly advises Bob to steer clear of Eric. Despite the shocking information, Bob doesn't appear frightened. He places the wrapped-up hand in a duffel bag and leaves the bar. After Bob departs, Marv breaks down in tears and begins cleaning the blood from the money, intending to return it to the Chechen Mafia. While playing with Rocco, Bob disposes of the wrapped hand by tossing it into the river. Detective Torres approaches him and inquires if Bob knows Eric Deeds, a question to which Bob denies any knowledge. Some time later, the Chechens arrive at the bar to reclaim the stolen money. Chavka also informs Marv that their bar will be used as a drop bar on the night of the Super Bowl. Eric approaches Bob and starts asking about Nadia, particularly if she has hurt herself recently. Concerned, Bob goes directly to Nadia to inquire about her connection with Eric. This question distresses Nadia, causing her to storm off and leaving Bob puzzled by her reaction. Meanwhile, Marv encounters Fitz, who is seeking to get into a car. Fitz is apprehensive due to the loss of his brother under similar circumstances. He wants to ensure that Marv hasn't lined the car's trunk with plastic and shows him a pistol as well. Marv inspects the trunk and reassures Fitz. Fitz gets into the car, and they set off on a ride. Marv proposes involving Fitz in the planned Super Bowl night robbery, during which a substantial sum of money will be present at the bar. However, Fitz declines the offer, only expressing his desire to stay alive. In the next scene, the car trunk opens again, and Marv instructs Fitz to exit and close it forcefully. As Fitz nervously complies, Marv suddenly runs him over repeatedly, killing him instantly. Marv then walks away from the scene, switches cars, and drives off. In a subsequent scene, Bob and Nadia meet, where Nadia expresses regret for her earlier behavior. She admits to Bob that she used to date Eric and initially thought he was kind, but eventually realized his true nature and broke up with him. Nadia also discloses that Eric is the one who killed Richie Whelan, a fact Bob was already aware of. Later, Marv has a meeting with Eric in a diner, where Eric asserts that Bob is frightened of him. Eric wants to earn more respect from Bob, and if not, he hints at serious consequences. Marv tries to calm Eric down and presents a plan where everyone can benefit. However, Marv's true intention is to replace Eric with Fitz for the Super Bowl robbery, using Fitz to divert Eric's attention from Bob's struggles. Detective Torres meets with his colleague again, receiving Eric's psychological profile. Something in the file piques Torres' interest, capturing his attention. Back at home, Bob calls for Rocco but gets no response. He discovers Rocco safely in his crate along with his umbrella, suggesting that Eric has been there. Bob confronts Eric, urging him to back off and declaring that he won't give Rocco up. Eric demands $10,000 from Bob to allow him to keep Rocco, but Bob refuses, as the amount is beyond his means. Marv informs Bob that he won't be present at the bar for the Super Bowl, leaving Bob skeptical of Marv's risky plan. Marv becomes emotional, haunted by his past when he was respected until losing the bar to Chavka. He's paranoid that Bob intentionally gives Marv's former stool to an elderly lady to humiliate him. Bob dismisses this, stating that the stool holds no significance. At the bar, Bob places $10,000 in the basement along with Rocco and a pistol. Meanwhile, Eric breaks into Nadia's home and coerces her into joining him to go to Marv's bar. Despite her reluctance, Nadia decides not to provoke the dangerous individuals and complies. To Bob's dismay, Eric and Nadia arrive at the bar together that night, with Nadia appearing embarrassed by the situation. Marv calls Eric but learns that he is already at the bar due to the ongoing commotion. Marv warns Eric not to underestimate Bob, who is soft-spoken and gentle. Marv prepares by lining his trunk with plastic before driving to the bar. He parks a couple of blocks away to monitor the unfolding plan. During the night, different groups of gangsters come by and drop off money at the bar. Eventually, everyone leaves except for Eric and Nadia. Eric shows Nadia his gun, then goes outside to smoke. Nadia cries and warns Bob that Deeds plans to shoot him. When Eric returns, Bob offers him money for the dog. Deeds asks Bob about Nadia's value and prefers the money in the safe. Bob refuses and begins telling him about Richie Whelan. Bob claims to have killed Richie, who owed money due to gambling. Richie won a lot at the casino, paid Marv, who had gambling debts, but not enough to cover everything. So Bob shot Richie to hide the payment. Bob questions Eric about claiming the murder, then shoots him twice as he responds. He assures Nadia she's safe and she leaves. The Chechens arrive, dispose of Eric's body, and offer Bob control of the bar, renaming it Bob's Bar. Bob hesitates but Chavka insists he's the new Marv. Outside, Marv notices the suspicious man approaching his car. He anticipates the next event. Marv is shot in the head shortly after. Torres arrives for further investigation, finding Marv dead and Eric missing. Bob isn't surprised given the neighborhood's nature. Torres lets Bob know that the church will be turned into housing and asks if Bob will be present at the closing, to which Bob agrees. It's revealed that Deeds couldn't have killed Richie Whelan since he was in a mental clinic at the time. Torres whispers to Bob, suggesting that no one expected Bob's involvement. Despite suspecting Bob of both Richie Whelan's and Eric Deeds' murders, the detective lacks evidence and is cautious about crossing paths with Papa Umarov's mob. In the final scene, Bob takes Rocco to Nadia's place. He apologizes to her for the events at the bar and admits his past mistakes. Bob explains that he was forced to eliminate someone like Eric to prevent ongoing blackmail. He asks if they can spend time together. Nadia, who both fears and loves Bob, eventually agrees, saying she'll grab her jacket. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thanks and see you again soon. Take care.